Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really dense, multi-century geopolitical history to wrap our heads around what is arguably the world's most contested port. We're going to jump back in time to analyze the high-stakes decisions that completely reshaped a tiny, arid stretch of coastline into the ultimate prize for global superpowers. If you've ever wondered how a seemingly remote landscape suddenly becomes the center of the world's attention, well, you're definitely in the right place.
So picture this. For centuries, Gwadar was just a tiny, hammerhead-shaped peninsula jutting out into the Arabian Sea. We're talking small fishing boats, mud brick homes, and an incredibly harsh desert environment. Nothing about it screamed global hub. Yet today, it literally holds the key to global oil routes and the economic futures of several massive nations. To understand how a secluded little settlement transformed into a multi-billion-dollar megaproject, we really just have to think about the map.
Geography alone dictates why superpowers care so much about this spot. Gwadar is positioned directly adjacent to the Persian Gulf and just outside the Strait of Hormuz. And that narrow strait is absolutely crucial. It's the conduit for about 35% of the world's global oil trade. Just imagine sitting on your front porch and watching a third of the entire world's energy supply float by every single day. That's Gwadar's geographic reality. It acts as this perfect connector between the Middle East, landlocked Central Asia, and the massive populations of South Asia.
All right, let's kick things off with Act 1, the distant beach house.
To understand how all this started, we have to talk about a concept called a jagir. Back in 1783, an Omani prince named Sultan bin Ahmad was exiled after a failed coup against his father. He sailed across the sea seeking refuge with the Khan of Kalat, who was the ruler of the region at the time. The Khan actually gifted Gwadar to the prince as a jagir, which is essentially an allowance. Think of it kind of like letting a buddy crash at your remote beach house and collect the rent from it just so they can survive. But legally, a jagir does not transfer sovereign ownership. The catch? When that prince eventually returned to Oman and actually became the sultan, he just kept Gwadar. It became this distant overseas enclave of the Omani Empire, and it stayed that way for nearly 2 centuries.
What's really wild here is that massive, often overlooked gap of Omani rule. From 1783 all the way to 1958, Gwadar was ruled by an Arab sultanate from completely across the sea. After Pakistan's independence, they looked at the map and realized, wait, we have a foreign enclave sitting on our most strategic coastline. And interestingly enough, diplomatic rumors suggest the Sultan of Oman actually offered to hand Gwadar over to India's Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in the mid-1950s. But for whatever reason, the offer was declined. Realizing exactly what was at stake, Pakistan's Prime Minister Feroza Khan Noon engaged in some really intense negotiations to finally reacquire the land in 1958.
So, what was the price tag? £3 million. The Pakistani government formally bought the territory back from Oman for £3 million. Now, in 1958, that was an absolutely astronomical sum of money. The Sultan of Oman was notoriously tough to negotiate with, so the British actually had to step in and act as intermediaries. And ultimately, the funds to buy Gwadar didn't just come out of Pakistani tax revenues. They were largely funded by the philanthropic contributions of Aga Khan IV, the spiritual leader of the Ismaili Muslims. With that massive payment, the missing piece of Pakistan's coastline was finally secured.
Which brings us to Act 2. Enter the Dragon. Former President Pervez Musharraf used this brilliant analogy back in 2002 to explain the grand vision here. Imagine a giant funnel. The incredibly wide top of that funnel is the massive, resource-rich area of Central Asia, along with the rapidly industrializing western region of China. All of the trade, the minerals, the exports from that vast territory, they all need a way to get out to the ocean. Gwadar acts as the narrow spout catching all that flow. It's the perfect inlet and outlet for a massive chunk of the continent.
Now here is where things get really intense. It comes down to China's absolute desperation to secure this spout. You see, China currently relies on the Strait of Malacca for an astonishing 80% of its energy imports. The Malacca Strait is this narrow, highly vulnerable sea route down near Singapore. And in the event of a conflict, it could very easily be blockaded by rival navies. Strategists call this China's Malacca dilemma. Well, Gwadar offers a direct, much safer overland bypass. Instead of sailing ships all the way around Southeast Asia, oil can just be dropped off at Gwadar and piped straight up north into western China. It's a total game changer. To secure this critical bypass, China went all in.
They provided 80% of the initial development funding just to physically build out the deepwater port. And then, in a move that completely sent shockwaves across the geopolitical chessboard, the operating rights for the port were officially handed over to a Chinese state-owned company in 2013. Make no mistake, China wasn't just building a port out of the goodness of their hearts for a neighbor, they were establishing their very own lifeline directly to the Arabian Sea.
Okay, moving right along to Act 3, the countermoves. You didn't think a move like that would just go unanswered, right? Viewing Gwadar as a potential future Chinese naval outpost, what some call a string of pearls base that could basically encircle them, India launched a massive strategic countermove. They decided to invest heavily in Iran's Chabahar port. And here is the craziest part. Chabahar is located less than 200 kilometers away from Gwadar. We literally have two massive geopolitical alliances building rival megaports right next door to each other on the exact same stretch of coastline.
It's literally a high-stakes chess match playing out in the Indian Ocean. For India, investing in Chabahar is huge because it provides them with their own overland route straight into Afghanistan and Central Asia, and it completely bypasses Pakistan. So you have both of these rising powers, China and India, establishing deep-water transit hubs to secure their economic futures and project their naval capabilities. It's a textbook example of modern geopolitical maneuvering. But we need to pull back from the grand macro strategy for a second. Act 4, the local reality. Despite all these billions of dollars flowing in from international investments, the project is hitting some severe domestic roadblocks on the ground. We're talking about really intense bureaucratic friction. For example, there was a prolonged land dispute where the Pakistani Navy was actually reluctant to vacate prime coastal real estate needed for the port's development. But beyond the red tape, there is a very severe, very real security threat.
The province of Balochistan has a long, deeply complicated history with the central government. Local Baloch insurgents feel incredibly deprived of their own provincial resources. Many of them view the Chinese handover not as some economic miracle, but as an illegitimate exploitation of their indigenous lands. Tragically, this has led to deadly attacks on Chinese engineers and workers, which creates this massive security burden. They're basically requiring heavy paramilitary deployments just to keep the construction moving forward.
The bottom line is this: steel, concrete, and global alliances just aren't enough to make a city thrive. Without genuinely taking the local Baloch people on board, ensuring they actually benefit from the revenues, the infrastructure, and the jobs, the port seriously risks becoming a highly contested white elephant. The local population simply cannot just be treated as a footnote in a global superpower's strategic business plan.
So let's wrap this up with the final verdicts.
From a distant Omani beach house gifted to an exiled prince way back in the 1700s, to a £3 million real estate transaction in the 1950s, all the way to the world's most heavily guarded trade funnel today, Gwadar's destiny is entirely unique. It's a story that is very much still being written, caught somewhere between the heavy gravity of colonial legacies, fierce local struggles for inclusion, and the absolutely unyielding ambitions of modern superpowers.
And so I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Can this multi-billion-dollar investment genuinely reshape the global economy and bring real prosperity to a historically neglected region? Or is Gwadar destined to remain trapped as an unbreakable flashpoint right in the center of a geopolitical Cold War? Thanks for exploring the chessboard with us today. Keep questioning the map, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.